everything you need to stay balanced on long trips. Residence Inn.
FDIC Chairman Sheila Bair says she would like banks to get smaller, less interconnected, and more stable. With just 9 months left in her term, Bair says her focus is getting banks to return to bread and butter lending. Sheila Bair joins us now at the Reuters Washington Summit. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. I think first we'd like to start out with just an update about where we are with bank failures. You've said before that the third quarter bank failures would likely peak. Where are we right now with bank failures?
Well, I think we're still predicting that there will be, it will peak this year. There will be more this year than last year. But our internal projections of how many bank failures we thought we would have this year has come down quite a bit. So it'll still be higher than the 140 we had last year, but not as high as we thought at the beginning of the year.
Okay, and do you think the overall cost of bank failures this year will be less than last year?
That's a good question. I think it is true that there'll be more bank failures this year. They're smaller banks, and actually our pricing has improved. There's a lot of competitive bidding right now for these failed banks, and our pricing's getting a little better. So yeah, there may be some improvements there as well.
Okay. And we saw with Basel recently, we saw a bit of a compromise among international regulators. We did get some tough bank capital standards, but we got a very long implementation period. One thing you just mentioned to us at the summit is that you see the U.S. possibly moving faster than other international counterparts with the implementation. Why do you think that is, and how do you see it playing out over the next few years?
Well, I think everybody in the U.S. delegation thought the transition period could have been shorter, and I think our banks are internationally well positioned. We had stronger capital standards going into this crisis. Then through the SCAP process, there was a lot of recapitalization. So I think our banks are in good position to meet these new standards. So yes, I think we can shorten up the transition period.
And do you have any sort of measurement of how quickly we could?
I would. That'll be an interagency process. I wouldn't want to prejudge that, but I do think there's a general sense that we can go faster. Yes.
Friday we saw President Barack Obama appoint Elizabeth Warren in a pretty critical role for the new consumer agency. What do you think is important to happen for that agency over the next 10 months as it gets built up?
Well, I think it's important to get it off the ground, and there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be put together, and a very full plate of policy issues to deal with. So we supported the agency, we always did, and we'll do our part to help it get going. And I do think it's important, and I think the President has said this, to eventually have a nominated and confirmed head of the Bureau. I think that's very important for the strength of the agency. But for now, I think it's important just to get it up and running, and we'll do what we can to help that process.
Is there any concern about not having a director in place immediately, especially that director is supposed to have a seat at the Systemic Risk Council and a few other critical roles? Could there be some administrative bobbles because of that?
Well, there could be. That's a good question. I think Congress clearly wanted a consumer voice on our board as well. So I think eventually it's very important in the not-too-distant future to get a confirmed head. But for the short term, I think this is a path the administration picked, and I do think it's good and important to get it up and running. And the statute says the Treasury Secretary is the head of the Bureau until someone is nominated and confirmed. So hopefully that consumer perspective will be brought to bear on these various groups until a Bureau head is appointed and confirmed.
Okay. And one thing that's still out there is the bank tax, too. I think Basel, that was a surcharge, is something that's still out there. We saw as part of the Obama's budget, bank taxes for TARP, for recouping TARP costs. Where do we stand right now with the potential bank tax?
Well, I want to clarify for the Basel surcharge, that's having a higher capital requirement. So that would not be a tax. It would be a requirement that they have additional capital or other loss-absorbing capability for the very largest systemic entities. You know, on the bank tax, we don't generally weigh into tax policy issues, except perhaps at a very broad level as it would directly impact safety and soundness of banks. We did obviously support the ex-ante fund and the Dodd-Frank bill, which unfortunately we didn't get that piece of it. But the bank tax itself, we haven't taken a position, and so I wouldn't want to comment further on it.
And just one last question is where we are with extension of credit to Americans. We're still seeing banks being pretty tight with their money. When do you think those conditions will ease up?
Well, I think there's also a problem with borrower demand. There's a lot of uncertainty about the economy, and so I think some borrowers are still sitting on the sidelines. They're not willing to commit to increased investment or expansion until they have a better sense of where the economy may be going. On the credit side, I think small business has been hurt in particular. A lot of small business lending was collateralized with home equity or with commercial real estate, and those values have gone down considerably. So I think that has hurt. So that is to say, a lot of this is more about the broader economy and the housing market, the commercial real estate market, and how quickly they mend over time. But we certainly encourage, we want our banks to lend, we want them to make prudent loans. We do this, every quarterly banking profile, we highlight the groups of banks that seem to be doing a better job maintaining their loan balances than others. So it continues to be a priority for us, but again, we want prudent loans. You don't want a lot of high-risk, poorly underwritten loans. That's what got us into trouble to begin with, so we don't want to go back to that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Carrie Witkowski. This is Reuters.
If it was simply about money, every bank loan would be a guarantee of success. At GE Capital, loaning money is the start of the relationship, not the end. I work with players every day. At GE Capital, we succeed only when they do.
Woo! Awesome! Yes!
We've got to get you out of the office more often.
My turn to drive.